Oklahoma head coach Brent Venables had some very interesting words to say at Big 12 Media Day. We're going to react to that. He did an interview with Gabe Ikard on the College Sports on Sirius XM. And here's the quote, David. I'm going to get your reaction, but here's the quote. And basically, Gabe was asking about recruiting. Essentially, I'm going to paraphrase here, but essentially, recruiting is going well despite the 6-7 season they had a year ago. And Coach Venables had this to say: "There's lots of ways you can be 6-7. None of it is any good, right? But had we had gotten blown out by a Middle Tennessee, had we gotten beat by Florida State 45-3, the conversation is probably a little different." Obviously, that's what Miami did last year. They lost to Middle Tennessee. They lost 45-3 Florida State. It's a clear shot from Coach Venables to Mario Cristobal in Miami. Your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, first off, let me just say on the front end, I'm here for all of this type of talk and candor from coaches. I think this makes it more fun because, Chris, I think you'd agree. When we talk to coaches off the record, this is how coaches speak about other programs. This is the type of candor that we get off the record. It is surprising Brent Venables kind of went out of his way, but, look, I think if we're being honest, this boils down to recruiting trail battles. Miami's gone head to head with Oklahoma for a handful of guys, notably David Stone, 5-star defensive lineman, still hasn't committed anywhere yet, but he's considered an Oklahoma-Miami battle. There's James Nesta, a linebacker, Oklahoma commit now. Wyatt Gilmore, defensive lineman, Oklahoma commit now. Jaden Jackson, recently an Oklahoma commit. So they're definitely butting heads on the recruiting trail, and that's where I would imagine these talking points from Coach Venables come from. Negative recruiting is an art form, and it's definitely a part of the recruiting game. I find it interesting, that he would throw shade because there's some things to throw shade at with his results last season, but we can get into that here later.
Yeah, and it's great that we're getting something over the summer. Coming from Big 12 Media Days, you're not expecting that. ACC is going to have their media days in a couple of weeks later in July. So maybe some things will come out of that. But Venables, I was kind of looking back at the connections with Venables and Coach Cristobal. And as you mentioned, the recruiting connections are going on right now. Both are in their second year at their respective schools as head coaches. Both of them did not do very well last year. Oklahoma 6-7, worst record since 1998 after they won 11 games the year before. Miami, obviously 5-7. They're tied for their worst season since 1979. So clearly both teams not where they want to be. Oklahoma clearly a lot more success since then. Over the last 20 years or so, they've won conference titles, a national title in there. They've done well over the last 25 years, as a program. Miami's trying to get back to that. I was looking back, and so they have faced each other as coaches, going back to the Alabama days when Miami, when Mario Cristobal was the O-line coach there, facing Clemson with Venables as the DC there. They split national titles. That's where they faced in 2015 and 16. First one goes to Alabama, and then the second one to Clemson. So they faced each other there. That's really the only ties. However, both these guys, same age, born a few months apart. And actually in South Florida, Mario obviously grew up in Miami, born in Miami, and Venables actually was born in Homestead before moving. So there's some ties there. They're same age and things like that. But really, it comes down to recruiting. I think the big thing, my big reaction, other than it's always good hearing coaches talk, and say things. And like you said, you're here for it. Yeah, we all are, and especially over the summer, you're not expecting it coming from Big 12 Media Days. They're not scheduled to face each other. They've not played each other. These two schools, Miami and Oklahoma, haven't played each other since 2009. They've played 7 times. They've had the big battles. Miami actually leads 4-3, and all 4 of those wins are on upsets. But anyways, they've had big games, but 2 big programs that haven't faced each other in a while. And, it's definitely good. And reality is Coach Venables is correct. Don't get beat by Middle Tennessee. Don't get blown out 45-3 to your chief rival. Obviously, Venables lost to Texas 49-0, so he has his own losses. It would. I think, David, and maybe you'll agree with this, but it would sting a lot harder coming from a team that's winning 11, 12 games, but another 6-win team, regardless of their previous success. Again, they just didn't have the wins either. And I think, like you said, they have their own losses, the Texas one, and they have others as well.
Yeah, what Venables is doing, again, this is recruiting. It's the art of deflection. And rather than, I'm sure Miami, from the Miami side of things, it's easy to throw the 49-0 loss to Texas that you're referring to. Um, I find it interesting too. Like, look, I think too, if you want to nitpick, Brent Venables, I mean, look, neither program, as you alluded to, neither program is where they want to be last year. But Brent Venables in his first year sunk Oklahoma much further relative to their recent results compared to what Mario Cristobal experienced in his first season at Miami. The decade prior to Brent Venables, Oklahoma averaged a record of 11-2 every season. And as we know, Miami's average record over the past decade is 7-5. So Venables, relative to the results prior to his arrival, sunk things much further at Oklahoma, both clearly in a rebuild mode at proud programs. So we'll see how that goes this year. But if it were me and Brent Venables, I wouldn't poke that Mario Cristobal bear. He is a psychopath in a good way, competitive psychopath on the recruiting trail. And I think it's fair too to point out that Mario Cristobal has a track record of success, whether that's FIU, inheriting a dumpster fire there, getting them to bowl games, or at Oregon, winning the Rose Bowl there. Whereas Brent Venables, has not been a head coach prior to his time at Oklahoma. So it's going to be interesting to follow, now that this these words have come out. I'm curious, Chris, if you feel like we will see Mario Cristobal returning some jabs anytime soon.
Not publicly, and I think Mario might be. We don't know yet exactly. We've followed him from afar, but I don't know if he might make those jabs if Miami's doing a little bit better than 5 wins. Maybe he'll throw in a little thing here or there if some coaches or teams or programs are kind of essentially annoying him a little bit. But I don't see him when, for example, ACC Media Days, I don't know if he'll get asked the question. I don't know if he'll fire back on his own. Certainly Miami, just in the last few days after Venables' comments, he gets that big, Miami gets that big commit from 5-star Josiah Trader. So that's certainly a step up there. Both these teams, currently just kind of an update with where they're at in the recruiting rankings. They're both outside the top 14 right now. And that's kind of the cutoff, the way I'm looking at it. Essentially right now in the 24/7 composite rankings, the top 14 all have at least 10 4 or 5 stars combined. Both Miami and Oklahoma are below that. Oklahoma's at 8 right now, if we're looking on quality of classes. And then Miami right now is at 5. So they still have a ways to go to, essentially crack that top 10, get some more high quality guys. But, I think both programs are similar in that they are recruiting well, given the season that they had last year. So that is common. And another thing I want to add too, David, the connection, again, Miami, with Cristobal and Venables facing each other on the field. But Venables has faced Miami quite a bit and had a lot of success when he was at Clemson. The 3 blowout wins when he was there as a DC. Also, he had a blowout win when he was at Oklahoma. And now, Miami returns the favor in 2009, and that's and Venables was there. But, so they have had those connections, and, it's interesting to see how it will continue. But I don't expect Mario to really fire back with words when Miami's not winning where they want to be. And, and again, just kind of, just a little note too about Venables. He did say something too, there's a lot of different ways you can go 6 and 7. For example, just an example, their last 4 losses were all 3 points or less. They do lose to Florida State by 3 in the Cheez-It Bowl there. Miami lose 45-3. And, in Venables, they do get that win against Oklahoma State. That was an upset win over a top 25 team. So they do beat their rival there, but regardless, what are we talking about here? 5 and 6 win teams is bottom line. And both these teams need to be a lot better. Both these teams need to do a lot more performing on the field, regardless of where the recruiting rankings, because neither of these coaches essentially are going to last long at their respective schools if they're not winning enough games, regardless if they won 7 games, average 7 games or 11, whatever their programs, wherever they were at. Bottom line is they've got to win games. And I think both of them are in some key seasons, not necessarily hot seat, but just they've got to win games immediately here. And I think this season's going to be fascinating to see how both these programs do.
I'm here for it all. And as you alluded to, Brent Venables with his ACC background, we all know that the ACC revels in beating Miami, even though they have been relatively mediocre here since joining the ACC. But they are a marquee program that teams revel in beating up on. And I think part of those comments from Brent Venables is due to that. So we'll be keeping an eye too on David Stone and that recruiting battle. Definitely the vibes are Oklahoma is the team to beat there, but he hasn't committed yet. And Mario Cristobal is certainly not going to give up on that one.